Starliner Media. Starliner Media presents Music Night at the Majestic with your host, Michael Boswell. Brought to you by...
Coordinating information on multiple signs and displays can be a big hassle. SDD presents Kiwi Sign, a digital signage controller that is not only easy to use, but cost-effective. Imagine being able to control all your digital signage from one easy dashboard, whether from your phone, tablet, or computer, to anywhere in the world. It even works with your existing signs and displays. SDD-US.com, SDD-US.com. All right, time once again for another edition of Music Night at the Majestic. With me tonight, Pete Anderson. Pete, welcome to the show.
How are you? Great to be here.
Well, thank you so much. Hopefully you feel that same way in 30 minutes when we wrap this dog and pony show up.
All right.
Well, tell you what, I might as well start the conversation with a question, being, how does a kid from Detroit wind up being one of the saviors of West Coast California country?
Wow. I'm not sure.
Not too heavy of a question for you to start with, huh?
No, I'm just the weight of the moniker. I grew up in Detroit. My father was from the South. Country music was on television and on the radio as I was growing up. And so I was exposed to it as a young age. But I got into blues, and in my teen years, I went through a long process and kind of went from Elvis Presley as a little kid into Dylan and things of that nature. And the whole thing was a romance with the guitar. I was just fascinated with guitar and anybody that played guitar. I thought Elvis was playing his guitar, and in retrospect, it was Scotty Moore. And so it was a process that I had. And when my mother retired from the auto industry when I got out of high school, and because she was from southeastern Colorado, she moved to Phoenix, Arizona. Don't ask me why she moved there, but to be closer to her sisters who were in New Mexico and Colorado. And she wanted to get out of the weather. So I started driving down there when I was like 20, 21, 22. I would spend winters there and then go back and hang out with my buddies in different little, hippie pads and that in Detroit. And I got exposed to the Burrito Brothers and Sweethearts of the Rodeo, the record by the Byrds, and Taj Mahal did 6 Days on the Road. So I kind of got my peer group that were rock guys were now playing country or country-ish type music. So it was kind of fascinating to me, and that's really what attracted me to it. Plus the fact that if you think about country music, I would say, 99.5% of all country songs are written on the guitar. I mean, Last Date, Floyd Kramer. That's the only one I can think of. We're not talking about modern country. Throw that in the trash. So it's guitaristic. Everything about, the mandolin, the banjo, it's strings, it's guitar. So I ended up wandering through blues, love for guitar, love for blues, love for guitar overpowered love for blues. And it was like, I want to play the guitar. I want to play everything. I want to play whatever I want to play. And I started on a quest to learn how to play the guitar really better. And country, as far as playing as a young guy, playing in a bar, 4 sets a night, offered like Western swing. You could play jazz. You could play fake steel licks on songs where there was no steel player on stage. You could do mandolin. You could do banjo rolls. You could do Chuck Berry, and then you could do the obligatory blues once a set or once or twice a night. So that's really how it started.
Well, I'll tell you, it's interesting that you mentioned Scotty Moore, because I remember when Guitar Cadillacs broke, because that was the first time how I became familiar with you. I'm sure probably, a lot of folks as well. And I'm telling, people, because like my buddies were all music people, we're, into everything. And I've always adhered to Duke Ellington's. There's only two kinds of music, the good kind and the other kind.
Yeah.
So my tastes, run rampant. But anyway, so when I'm telling people, man, you got to listen to this stuff, listen to, how well done this is, And they're saying, well, who does Pete sound like? I'm like, well, Pete sounds like Pete, but what I thought was really cool, it is cool with your stuff, is you can hear your influences where you are reverential to the people, you know, or you'll do a lick, where I should say you will sneak in a lick from one of your guitar heroes in there with something else. So when Guitars Cadillacs, which is where I was headed with this, they're like, well, who does he sound like? And I said, you know what? To me, Pete is like Scotty Moore on steroids. You had that the country, the blues, the jazz, all mixed in there like Scotty did, but you took it another step with it.
Well, you know what? That's a very astute observation, because I would explain it the same way. And what I find interesting is, I don't know if you know about my signature guitars with Reverend, but I have a guitar that's called the PA1, which is semi-hollow F-holes. It originally comes with P90s and a Bigsby. And if you look at that guitar, it looks very much like the guitar that Scotty was playing with Elvis, because he was playing an F-hole Gibson at the time. And so I find it ironic, and actually in a good way, that even though I'm known for the Telecaster, I love the Telecaster, I still play the Telecaster. Now I have a signature model called the Eastsider with Reverend that looks very much like a Telecaster. But if you come to see me play the Pete Anderson Trio, where I'm playing more blues and jazz, the body of those sets, I'll be playing this PA1, and it looks like the Scotty guitar. And I'm somewhat known for bridging the gap between blues and country, and Scotty was the trailblazer for bridging the gap between blues and country. So I just find it ironic that I came back home, because when you're a little boy growing up in the 50s, and you probably experienced this as well, but your parents' friends and aunts and uncles and neighbors would say, hey, what do you want to be when you get big? And because there was only 3 television stations and a couple of radio stations and maybe Life magazine and the newspaper, you didn't have all these career options that you even knew were available. So you'd say, I want to be a policeman. I want to be a fireman. I want to be Army guy. Mine was I wanted to be in the Navy and be an artist. When I was like 7 or 8, I want to be an artist because I like to draw. But I thought I had to be in the Navy too. So there wasn't a lot of options, occupational options to draw from until I saw Elvis Presley. I saw Elvis Presley on TV. I said, I want to be that guy. I want that job. Now, my theory is not everybody can be your inspiration. So in every decade, we had Elvis, we had the Beatles, we had Springsteen, it goes on up to Kurt Cobain, that were spokesmen for their generation. And so I couldn't make it to be Elvis, but then the next best thing is Elvis's guitar player. And in retrospect, I was attracted to Elvis by the sound of the guitar, but I was too young to realize that it was Scotty and not Elvis. So I actually ended up where I belong.
Some things are just meant to be.
I guess. I mean, I'm happy about it, and I'm really happy to say that I got to meet Scotty once.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
Well, we played. This was when Lisa Marie was married to Michael Jackson, and Dwight and I, we were invited. Just the two of us were invited for this big special TV blah 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 show filmed at the Pyramid in Memphis. And the Pyramid in Memphis is the basketball arena. And they had 3 stages set up, and one guy would play, the next guy would play. Michael Bolton was there, Dwight was there, NRBQ was there. It was very eclectic. And we played Mystery Train, Dwight and I. But on one of the other stages was Scotty and the trio. I can't remember if everybody was alive. But Scotty was there, and I just went up to him and shook his hand and said, hey, I'm a big fan. I love your stuff. And, you're a big impetus of why I'm playing the guitar, which I got to do with B.B. King, too, which really I got to go to B.B. King and shake his hand and just whisper, said, you're the reason I'm playing guitar. I don't know that he didn't know who the hell I was, but I at least got that out,
Exactly. Well, that's very cool, Pete.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, as I mentioned, it was probably, your association with Dwight is how most people, became aware of you. How did that whole collaboration start? I know you'd were working. You had actually the album came out in '86, but you'd actually done demos like 5 years prior to that, hadn't you?
We didn't do. He had done some demos. I heard his demos and I initially heard the demos to hear the guitar playing of Jerry McGee. Jerry McGee's played sessions, and he also played with the Ventures later in life, and he was a great guitar player. He played a Strat with a thumb pick, had a real cool style. So I was always looking for guitar players, like what did they do? Steal a lick or hear something. So a friend of mine had a demo tape of Dwight, a guy named Boo Bernstein, a great steel player who had been playing with Dwight. And he said, you should hear this guy. I said, is Jerry McGee's on it? He goes, yeah, let me hear it. So he got me a cassette. I listened to Jerry McGee, but in retrospect, Jerry's playing was cool, but what I heard was Dwight's songs. So I was like, wow, they sound like real country songs that aren't being written right now, but are real country songs. And I could tell a real country song. I'd been playing in the clubs as a guitar player for hire for some years by then. So the course of events, he needed a guitar player. Him and Jerry had a falling out. He was playing this big line dance club and he needed a guitar player. And so I went to play guitar with him and got kind of a hold of the songs. We ended up having a little 4-piece band, him on acoustic, Jeff Donovan on drums, Gordon Shryack on bass, and myself. So then I got a hold of the arrangements so I could work on the intro licks, outro licks, solos, things of that nature. Because I was the guy, right? I mean, Dwight was playing acoustic and singing, and everything else was like take it beat. So I started formulating, melodic themes and ideas. That said, we did that, and then we expanded the band. We ended up with a different bass player, J.D. Foster, added a fiddler, Brantley Kearns, and started playing. And I had Dwight was sleeping in his car at a friend's house in the driveway. And we were playing, doing a couple gigs together. And he told me, and I said, well, you can sleep I have a little house behind a house, a courtyard, and there's a little storage room because I slept on the floor in the living room. There was no bedroom. I said, you can sleep in the laundry room. Don't sleep in your car. So he's like, really? I said, yeah. So we kind of bunked together for quite a few months and talked about our dreams and stuff. And one of our big dreams, what I told him, I said, what if, I said, we should make a record. And he's like, how can we make a record? I got to go to Nashville and get in line and try to get a record deal, blah, 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 blah. And I said, no, we can go to a studio. They hold on to the masters. We can work downtime, which would be midnight to 8 in the morning. We can work, or Sunday or whatever they give us, and they hold the masters and we make payments like a layaway plan. And so we found a studio that we could do that. We started making a record, expanded the band, and we put the record out on an independent little label. And we just chose this Oak. Everybody says, what's Oak Records? It was just an imprint that the guy at the pressing plant had. It had no significance. We just put it on. We could have put on there, Clown Boy. It wouldn't have mattered. So we put that name on there. Now, the interesting thing for music history people is that the girl that was running the office at the pressing plant, which was called Tab Rex, was Jeanette Napolitano. And Jeanette Napolitano eventually became Concrete Blonde and had some success. Prior to working for Tab Rex, she worked for A&M Records. So she stole their press list when she came over to Tab Rex. So when we made this EP, and it was it was 12-inch, so it was the size of an album, but it was only 6 songs. She had the list to mail it to everybody. So he started mailing out boxes of records, and the records would come to these music writers all over the country: Chicago, New York, LA, Orlando, Tampa, everywhere. Dallas, Houston, Austin, Seattle. All the major cities would get this box of records from Tab Rex, and the majority of the records were punk records. Rodney Bingenheimer's Hell Comes to Your House, Butthole Surfers, all this kind of stuff. So these, and you come to realize most of the writers at these newspapers were musicologists. Their dream job was they had a record collection. They were usually older. They would be considered boomers, and now they have their biggest fantasy because they don't play music. They get to write about it. So they're looking through these records and they're like going, I don't want to listen to Hell Comes to Your House. I don't want to listen to the Butthole Surf. Dwight Yoakam, country record, Ring of Fire, some songs a song they recognize. Let me put this on. Well, fortunately, we were very good, and it blew them away. And we got unsolicited monster press. We had about a small phone book full of monster press of this EP that we made, and it blew up from there. Really,
wow, that's an amazing story.
it is. It's a movie. It's up to getting signed. I mean, there's a movie after you get signed to the trials and tribulations, but
Right.
we basically made an independent EP. We had no manager, no label, no attorney, no booking agent, no publicity. We had nobody, just me, Dwight, and this piece of vinyl that we made. And it was a success. And that meant everyone was like, dude, what? And we could say, almost to a T, I said, I'd really like for us to be on Warner Brothers Records. We got that to happen. We got a good manager. He ended up getting a good attorney. I got a great attorney. Our dream came true. It's a monster dream. If you told somebody, like when I told my mother, who was an auto worker, I told her when I was 18, and this was in Detroit, Michigan, I said, Ma, there's something better for me in this life. I'd already had a couple of factory jobs by the time I was 19. And I said, I just know there's something better for me in this life, and it's not here. And she started crying, and she said, you scare me when you talk like that. Because all she knew was, her and my dad were like, head down, go to the factory, get home, get your 2 weeks off, go to the lake, do some fishing, sit in the yard, have a beer. It was that middle class life. Get your house. You had your medical paid. They were both strong union members, so they made a life for themselves. They never finished high school, and they were unskilled workers, but they became part of the little lower part of the middle class because of the way things were situated back then. And when I told her that I wasn't going to be a tool, her success for me would have been not to be an unskilled laborer in the factory, but to be a tool and die worker, somebody that had a skill that could use a micrometer and a lathe. And it's like, I couldn't get my hands near that. I would freak me out. I didn't want to get near saws. I didn't want to get near lathes. All these guys walking around with like their fingers missing. No, that's not for me. And it freaked her out. And by the grace of God, near the end of her life, she got to see me on The Tonight Show. We watched it together. I sat next to her, and she saw me, and she goes, she looked at me, and then she looked at me like in person. I said, no, Ma, they taped it later. She was, how did this happen? Anyway, it was cool.
That's great. It's a great story. Now, kind of to tie together two things that you'd mentioned before. You're the guy playing the licks and in the band and stuff. As I mentioned, I love how you are simultaneously reverential to the people that were your influences, but you bring something new. On Honky Tonk Man, you could have just gone with a straight cover of it, but you take what Grady Martin did, and then you do your own thing to where you're paying respect, you're showing that this music, the players, but you're you. And I think that's great. When you're doing a cover of something, what's your approach to it?
Well, first I have to be inspired by the cover, and hopefully it's not a cover that I feel is nearly impossible to cover. So kind of like last stop on the train of covers is if Aretha Franklin or Ray Charles does one of your songs, it's done. You don't go and let's cover Ray's version of this, or you're not going to get there. So consequently, that's a part. It was like, what is the cover we're doing? We did a record called Under the Covers with Dwight. And the one song that I dreaded us doing, because we did some pretty strong stuff as far as being known as great songs, but was Wichita Lineman. And I'm like, man, I don't think we can cover Wichita Lineman. I mean, we did, and I'm proud of it, but I also, for example, Little Sister. When Dwight started doing Little Sister, I didn't listen to the record. I was like, I know it sort of goes like this. I didn't try to copy James Burton. I was inspired by the groove and the beat, and that there was a lick in that place, and it went sort of like what James did. So I brought my own thing to the party. I remember a long time ago reading about B.B. King, and B.B. King wanted to be T-Bone Walker. I did not hear T-Bone Walker and B.B. King's playing to save my life. I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I read about this, and he goes, I wanted to be T-Bone. I wanted to be T-Bone. And to the grace of God, and for everybody, he couldn't be, in his mind, he couldn't be T-Bone. So he stopped and he became B.B. King. Mm-hmm. Now, T-Bone was the carrot that he was following and pushing down the road. There is actually a thing called BB's Boogie. It's on Kent, and I found it on the flip side of a 3 o'clock blues, 3 o'clock in the morning blues, and he sounds like T-Bone. Everyone I've ever played it for said, tell me who this is. They go, T-Bone. I go, it's B.B. King. So he got there, right? Mm-hmm. He got T-Bone, but he still didn't think he got there, which you never get there. So he stopped trying to be T-Bone and became B.B. King. And I had all these guys, same thing, trying to be James Burton. Albert Lee was completely untouchable. Trying to be B.B. King, trying to be Albert King. And I was artistic and had an art thing. So I got into music for art. I didn't get into music to play frat parties and work my way through school. And so it was different. So I looked every aspect of music as a place where I could create, be artistic. And guitar licks, melodies, stuff like that. Get my technique, listen to a lot of records, practice really hard, and then let it come through your brain and play what you play.
Well, in Little Sister, I could be wrong, but to me, it's not like you kind of snuck in just like a quick nod to B.B. King.
Oh yeah, you're sharp. I did. I mean, that's I did an actual B.B. King lick. It's a B.B. King lick, and I just played it real fast because he didn't play it that fast. I also I'm not sure if it's Please Please Baby or Little Sister, but I kind of was channeling. I think I'd have to listen, but one of them I did some sixth runs that would be like Freddie King off of Hideaway. I did some of those. So I remember hearing what it must have been Little Sister. I remember hearing it on the radio and really smiling because I snuck in a Freddie King lick and a B.B. King lick. And I'm like, I'm hearing them on country radio. I'm hearing a B.B. King lick on country radio. I made it, So I really did. You're very astute.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. But that was one of the things that I thought was great about those records. Is, as I say, they're reverential to the history of the music, to the songwriting, the original production, the original playing, but you guys added your own touch to it. And that's one of the things we talk about on the show. If you can't bring something new to a cover version, there's no point to me in doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because it's already been done. And there are some records that there's no way you're going to top them. Those records need to, just let them be. You can't improve on it. So go find something else, or better yet, write your own. Now, one of the covers that you guys did that I thought was really interesting was when the cover of Things We Said Today. I really liked your guitar work on that because that was such a distinctive, and with you, the tone, that's how you could tell on a record. But on that one, how did you work that one up?
Wow. So that's an odd story. And I'll try to be quick with it. But Chris Isaak had some success in England where Warner's England, which could do what they wanted, took one of his songs and rammed it down everybody's throat and repackaged his record. And they had some success before Chris had really broken through. So he had broken through on Warner's England. So somebody at Warner England got the bright idea, hey, this is working. Let's do this with Dwight Yoakam. So they got this whole staff of British people together at Warner England, and they said, here's what we'd like for Dwight to do. So we'll take some of his songs that he's already got, we'll repackage them, and then, hey, he should cut some of these songs. Let's give him a list of songs we think would be very successful in England and see if we'll give him a budget to cut it. So they did that. Warner England did that, the staff of people. And they came up with Things We Said Today, and they came up with Hey Little Girl, I can't remember. There might have been 4 tunes. I don't remember. So I'm a fan of Jeff Beck. I mean, it was like, who's not? Yeah, it's like things we said today. All right, I'm not going to do it like the Beatles. And I had a really cool guitar with a whammy on it. It was a Telecaster. So we revved it up. We made it rock, and I did Pete Anderson tips his hat to Jeff Beck. I guess it was my inspiration.
Yeah, no, that's a great record. Now, one of the songs that you had a fantastic solo on, but the record, for whatever reason, didn't take off like it should have, and that was Gone.
Oh yeah.
The title track, your solo on that record just absolutely rocks.
That'll be me. Yeah, Dwight and I were both Midwestern kids remembering Saturday night dirt track racing, and it was definitely like the kind of song, like if you're playing it in the car, you end up going too fast. Like, we better slow down because we're way over the speed limit. We're hot rodding to this song. So I approached it like a hot rod. I mean, and so did Dwight. And I don't know if you've ever seen the video.
Yeah. The
video is frightening because we were literally standing on a racetrack with a guy 10 feet from us coming by at 100 miles an hour. Like, he's going to hit us. He's going to hit us. And, thank God it didn't happen, but we were out on a racetrack doing the video, and we did it on Letterman. It's a race car song. It's a Midwest, growing up in Michigan, Ohio, that, your town, hot rodders, kids out in the suburbs racing their cars and hot rodding.
Yeah, that album had a lot of great tracks, and to me, Warner Brothers just got to drop the ball on it.
It's a total mystery. We came off of a triple platinum This Time record. This was going to be like bringing in the fastball pitcher at the end of the game to seal the deal. We were going to seal our deal with this record, Gone. And between You, Me, and the Fence Post, musically, we did. The record's amazing. The record is amazing, top to bottom. The reviews are amazing. When you look at some guys said, and these are big time review guys. It wasn't like, Joey the Hobo newspaper in, small town Alabama. These were big time review guys. One guy said the record sounded like a greatest hits record because it just went from one to the next to the next to the next. And I was so impressed with Dwight's songwriting on the record, and the production was as good as we could do at the time, and I'm very pleased with it. And to this day, I do not have an answer. I don't know. I mean, major record companies are funny. They're weird, and there's when you're getting paid a nice salary and there's no skin in the game, things change. And we weren't in Nashville. Our manager wasn't in Nashville. We were LA guys, so we weren't at every little golf meeting, church meeting, coffee clutch, so-and-so's office, this guy's party, this guy's backyard party. We weren't in their face like, how you doing? What's going on? But the press on that record, off the chain, really just like, I've always been baffled by that because that was the backbreaker.
Yeah.
That record, then it was like, we just leveled off. And of course the record business started going south.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, you mentioned the previous album, This Time, and a couple things on that one, and then we'll move on to your other things. But the first time I played that record, in fact, it was the intro on the title track, This Time, and I was playing it for a friend of mine who was a prog rock, 70s rock guy. Just has absolutely zero use for country music, what have you. So I play it for him, but I got it cranked. And that opening on there, he looks at his jaw drops. And he looks at me, he goes, "Oh my God, they're actually producing this stuff now." He's like, "I can't believe this. This is amazing." And he made me play him the whole record. By the time we got done, he's like, "Play it again."
Oh, wow.
So now, but on that album, 1,000 Miles from Nowhere. Yeah, quick tangent on that one. I was working in radio when that song was out, and so was a buddy of mine. And whenever that one would come on, he and I would ride gain on that to get every last ounce of that outro that you did on that, because the guitar work and the production was just so great. How did you get that cascading guitar sound, and what were you doing to achieve that?
I guess I'd have to listen to it to figure out exactly what you mean by the cascading sound, but it was a song, Dwight and I had a long, successful career, and sometimes Dwight would bring something to the table that was like, man, this is done. I don't really have to do a lot. And sometimes I'd have to dig in. Like on that covers record, I really had to work. I had to work hard because I knew the songs were great, and I had to come up with ideas and arrangement ideas. Well, in the case of 1,000 Miles from Nowhere, it's one song that I personally have verbally taken credit for, in that I had a lot to do on that song because Dwight wrote a song that went, well, I'm a it's 1-6-2. It's the most common changes of all time. Now he's a great singer, which really helped us, but I had to come up with something. And I came up with the lick, and I used that same whammy guitar that I used on Things We Said Today. And I came up with what turned out to be a pretty powerful hook lick. And so then and we used the whammy bar, on the break on the 6th chord. And Dwight had that lifting vocal thing that he lifted as we went through the changes, which really helped. And it had a beautiful melody. But I married up the lick to the melody in some fashion that I guess gave it extra power. And then the outro, I was really doing Layla. I was Layla. I was Duane Allman and Eric Clapton. Only I'm a little better than Eric Clapton. So I was better than both of them on the end of that song to some degree, but because it was so long ago, what they did was experimental and they were on drugs. But that said, the outro was like, I could do this Layla thing where Dwayne's playing slide and Eric's playing around him, and I just vibed it, and it was my, Layla was my inspiration for the outro on 1,000 Miles from Nowhere.
Yeah, it's a great record. I remember one time I was driving through West Arkansas at like 3:30 in the morning, and there was just nothing but, stars, and then that record came on. And
wow.
There's never a more fitting moment than this song with where I was and all that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful melody. It's we hit one. We got and it suited melodically. It's sort of like what Orbison could do, and a lot of people couldn't do what Orbison, because Orbison could keep going up vocally. He could just keep going higher, and when you think he got there, he'd take it up. So he'd take it up a fifth. He'd take it up an octave. So Dwight had the same ability, in his range to like just increase the ante. Like we thought we got there. No, we're going up again. And so it's a beautiful melody, and I think it's a song that really stands the test of time.
Oh, I agree completely. Tell me this, Pete. We're actually just a bit past our 30 minutes. Do you have time to get to the rest of the?
Oh yeah, whatever you want to do. I'm here.
Okay. I just don't want to keep you.
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Well, tell you what. Why don't we move into some of the other things that you produced? And okay. The first album that comes to mind is you had worked with Steve Forbert on his The American and Me album, which I think has got several tracks there that are just absolutely stunning.
I love it.
And how did you come to produce that album?
I'm not sure I can't remember how Steve got to me or found me. I'm not quite sure. Somebody came to me with it, or Steve recommended it, or I got it through something. But Steve, I've always said this in interviews. When somebody said, "Hey, I want to do a record with you, here's my songs," he gave me a cassette of the 10 best, highest quality songs I'd ever gotten from an artist to say, "Okay, here's my cassette. Let's make a record." The songs were all there. There was nothing. It was nothing like the bridge is wrong. This is wrong. All I had to do was play along, come up with some motifs and some ideas. He would sing, and play guitar at the same time. He'd sing and play guitar and acoustic guitar at the same time, which I hadn't had an artist that could do that. And he's super talented. So the record, I love the record. I totally love the record. I was on a mountain biking trip in Utah in the middle of nowhere, camping. And I was on a plateau kind of thing. And I walked somewhere across some little campground to do something. And I heard this little thing in my ear. And I was like, it's really weird when you hear your guitar playing and you're not expecting it. And it's cool because you get an out-of-body experience, because I've scrutinized it so much, I don't listen to it. When I'm done, I'm like an actor that doesn't want to see the dailies or look at his films. I'm done. Because I hear, I should have done this or I might have done that. I hear little imperfections. And I heard this music wafting across this plateau in the middle of nowhere. And so I started walking towards this other campground. I didn't get too far, and I got like another 20 feet, and I realized it was me playing on, they had Steve Forbert's CD or whatever, and they were playing it around their campsite. So it was a real out-of-body experience that doesn't get to happen very often. But I love the record. He's a monster. He's a super talented. He's a gifted songwriter. He's one of the gifted songwriters. I've got to work with some really gifted songwriters. Michelle Schock, Darden Smith, Lucinda Williams, Jimmy Lauderdale, the guys in Blue Rodeo, Black Velvet Band from England, Martin Stevenson from England. I mean, I got where I was in the niche of working with songwriters, and they were all really, really good songwriters. And I'm such a fan of great songwriters. I'm a fan of their songs. Now I get to be part of the team, right? It's like I get to be Elvis's guitar player kind of thing, you know? So it's a treat for me to be able, somebody to say, you produced the American in me. That's as close as I can get to it, because I didn't write it. I wish I could write it, but I don't have that skill. But I produced it. And in the case of me producing it, I played some instruments on it and had some input into how the eventual sound of it was going to be. So I'm grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned Blue Rodeo, the Casino album. You're Everywhere. That one, I thought that track, that one got a great guitar solo in it.
You're going deep. I don't think I played on Blue Rodeo. I'd have to check. Did I play?
Yeah, I don't know who did, but it's this other one where the production, and what I think is the hallmark of your production is the fact that everything is super clean.
Yes.
But at the same time, you've got an earthy, raw feel to it, to where it's like you're in the room and you're experiencing it, but everything is sonically clean. And that's a very hard thing to achieve.
Well, I had great engineers. I used to work at Capitol Records in Hollywood, Studio B, pretty much exclusively. We did the Blue Rodeo record there. It's the same room that like Miles Davis used, and David Lee Roth, Buck Owens, Merle Haggard. I mean, the legacy, Frank Sinatra, the legacy of the room is incredible. And I worked there pretty straight through for a couple of years, where I just was there every day, 5 days a week, making records. So we did the record there. And when you talk about that, an interesting sidebar to that is that when I was younger and in my teens and early 20s, and I would listen to albums, I would put the record on the stereo, lay in front of the stereo, take the album, the cardboard album, and put it over my head, so I had like sensory deprivation. So I block out all the light, and I would just lay there and listen. And then, because of the type of music I was listening to, for the most part, I would imagine myself in the room with the band, and I would see myself sitting in the corner watching the session go on. So I could see the drummer, I could see the bass player, and I was witnessing it, but in the room. And I used to like kind of visualize that and fantasize about that in my head. So maybe that somewhere played into when I listen back while I'm producing something, there's an element of space. If it's super pop and polished and high dollar, and, don't get me wrong, I love the sound of the Shania Twain records, and I would rather my daughter was a fan of Shania Twain in her heyday than, let's say, Britney Spears or somebody that's over-sexual. But and Mutt Lange is a monster producer. But those records are like, they're right here, man. There's no depth perception. Mm-hmm. But that's what they are. I'm not putting it down. They're monster productions. But that's not me. So, I wouldn't put on, as a kid, I wouldn't have put on a Shania Twain record and imagine myself in the room, because there's no room in the room. There's no room left. It's all taken up. So I can't even get in the room. I'm witnessing something else, a different type of production. But I was listening to jazz. I was listening to blues. I was listening to country, folk, Dylan. Dylan, you can get in the room really easy. You can hear the room. Blues, Muddy, the chess records, you can hear the room, and so you can visualize, what did that room look like, Even Motown, you could hear the room. They were recording in a basement, probably with a linoleum floor and brick walls. So I think that's where it comes from. I don't know. You're the only person I've ever talked to about this, but I've thought about it, and I remember doing that.
Yeah, I did the same thing where, I put the record on, put the headphones on, and then just, picture myself in the room as they were recording it in trying to absorb every little thing. And, when you go through, it's like the first time you listen to it, you kind of take it in. And the next time you listen to it, you pick up on a little something else. And then each time, I would kind of like focus on the guitar this time. What's the bass player doing? What's the drummer doing? That type of thing. And then, then it kind of takes you back to the big picture, if you would.
Like a flower. It just keeps opening.
Exactly.
You keep looking at it. And even today, I'll listen to stuff that was really part of my school books, 50 years ago, and I hear different things.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting trip, for life.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned making records. We need to talk about your records.
Okay.
Because you've got, 7 solo albums out now? Something like that, give or take?
Yeah, sure. I have to count them. I don't want to count them.
I'll tell you, the current one, 60s with a Twist.
Yeah.
I really enjoy that, because this is another example of, it's all covers. But you take each song into a different way. So again, Beatles, like you would think we said today, here you do Day Tripper, but you almost turn it into like a psychedelic jazz thing. How did you pick the songs, and how did you come to decide what direction you were going to take those?
I picked the songs. I was playing some selected covers on my Monday night residency that I have here in Los Angeles every Monday before the pandemic. And I have an organ trio. So it was a keyboard player that played organ and key bass, and then a drummer and myself. And the organ player and the drummer are schooled musicians that can keep up with me and make me work to keep up with them. They're younger and more able to play complex stuff. Not bebop per se, but complex stuff. So every one of those songs had like an inspiration that I got from listening to really cover versions. So I would listen to Bill Black. I think it was Bill Black that did Canadian Sunset. I had done Our Day Will Come on my first record, Working Class. And the reason I did that on the first record, Working Class, was when I made that record, a lot of guys had recovered Sleepwalk by Sano and Johnny. Now, that's one that we talked about. It's like, I'm not going to try to cover Sano and Johnny. That's done. It's done. But I'd like a song like Sleepwalk that when you hear it, everybody knows it, and you do a version of it. So I started looking around, and, doing an instrumental version of Sleepwalk is, like I said, it's already been done. But if I looked around, I found Our Day Will Come, which had that kind of romantic, pretty melody, and nobody had done an instrumental version. So I did an instrumental version on my first record. And then I started playing it out, and I sort of found that the purpose got defeated, because some younger guys would come up to me and go, "Hey, did you write that song? What's that song?" And I was sort of like, man, the reason I did this song is because I thought everybody would know that Our Day Will Come. But I was happy to do it. But it's like, now I was like, oh, you don't know that it's Ruby and the Romantics. So it's still a pretty song. So we started doing it as a samba. And I don't really know exactly where that came from. And I started playing I was playing slide, and I was playing slide from a different perspective, where I was using it more like a lap steel, where I was playing clean melody on the slide and not like super bluesy stuff or trying to be Dwayne or Derek Trucks or those guys. I was taking a different path because they've already buried the path they're on. You're not going to compete there. So that became a samba. I was listening to Bill Black's version of Canadian Sunset, another great melody. The In Crowd, I was just kept driving around and popping up on the radio was Ramsey Lewis's version of the In Crowd. And I was like, this is a cool song. And I had been voicing the head in another song, like in a little vamp. And I was like, I'm going to do In Crowd. So that's how I got to that one. Actually, Day Tripper, I had heard Mongo Santa Maria do Day Tripper, and they chopped it up because it's not the exact same changes. It doesn't do exactly, but the riff is there and the gag is there, but it's not the same way the Beatles did it. The Beatles did I think they even had a key change in it or something, or the way they did the solo. So I did Mongo Santa Maria's version, more or less. And sort of Jeff Beck the head, but without a lot of distortion, and really kind of did some substitutions and took some little liberties with the melody. And then Ode to Billy Joe was actually a song that I was playing with my friends, and we would have this club there was a jam session, and I would play with them at the jam session, like Sunday afternoon or whatever. And this one woman used to come in and always sing Ode to Billy Joe. And it's a great song, but it's super long. I mean, the song is like, it's like, oh, we're going to do Ode to Billy Joe. We only got an hour. We got to get out of here in an hour. So I hope we can finish it. It's like El Paso by Marty Robbins.
Yeah.
Thursday night in the honky tonk, somebody comes up to the stage and goes, you got to do El Paso. And it's like, dude, we've only got an hour. We won't finish the song. So I started exploring the song while she was singing it. And I had my baritone guitar. And so I decided, let me do a hybrid and do a swampy version because I really like the lay of it. But I hadn't really heard an instrumental version of it. And then the last song is the Burt Bacharach, and it's just a really pretty melody. And I had a baritone guitar and tremolo, and I thought this would attach itself well to this melody. So that's kind of how we got to all those songs. And I was playing all those songs. And then I said, I hadn't recorded anything in a while. And I said, let's do an EP. And I think if you're witnessing this, EPs are becoming a little more fashionable now because of the state of the music business, and nobody sells CDs anymore. And so you don't make the commitment to cut 10 songs. And you can cut 5 and you can get artwork and sell it off the bandstand. It's less cost of producing 5 songs. Let's put it that way. So I decided I hadn't done something in a while. Let me do an EP, and I'm going to collect these songs that I've been all playing on their own and on the bandstand. And that they were all hits of the 60s, I'm pretty sure. But I'm doing them different. So 60s with a twist, and then an excuse to play with my keyboard player, Luke Miller, who's a terrific keyboard player, and my drummer at the time. And so I think Jeff Sorensen played drums on it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did. Who plays with me still is a great drummer. And he studied at North Texas State. And, these guys can play. So I wanted to cut them loose and play these songs, so I had some boundaries. The songs and the changes were the boundaries, and we'd been playing them. And then I wanted these guys to do what they do, and so kind of show off their abilities as well. So that's the whole reason for 60s with a twist.
Gotcha. Well, the Ode to Billy Joe is such a funky groove that you've got going in that one, to where it really, all of them sound very fresh. Yeah, but that one really, gets your head, nodding, your toe tapping. So
yeah, we've been playing them on the bandstand. So when we came in to cut them, we were hot. I mean, it was like we cut all the basics like in like less than 3 hours. We were done with the drum tracks. We're like, we're done, and I went back, of course. I think I played real bass on it. Luke initially played, then Luke could be freed up with both hands, and he did the orchestration with the strings because he's great at that. Ron Jubila came in and did saxophones, and I wanted to do something unique where there was no brass, and he was like, Ron Jubila is a terrific sax player. If you don't know him, he's the head of curriculum at the Musicians Institute, but he's played with everybody, Ricky Martin and all these guys, and then he played with all the rockabilly and swing bands. So he just came in with his horn. He goes, "Oh, I know this one." And he played the baritone, then he played the tenor, he played alto. He did it all. So I wanted to orchestrate it as much as I could, like an old CTI Creed Taylor, like back in the day when Creed Taylor was making all those records with different guys.
Yeah.
And, he cut the basics, then he put on strings and horns. So it was sort of that impetus too for that. It was a fun project for me because I love the melodies. So the melodies are like a perfect model body that you can hang on. Like people hire a woman because she's a perfect size 1 or whatever, and they put all these clothes on her and everything looks great. So the songs are like that. They're like perfect models.
Well, you can't go wrong with Burt Bacharach.
No, you cannot. Absolutely. Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, I know you've got a couple other, got something else you've been working on, and that's your books.
Yeah.
And the one is How to Produce a Record. And we got to touch, already touched about your skill at that. Where did the idea for the book come about? And tell us all the good stuff.
Well, I have a process that I use, and I don't think there should be a rule to producing a record because that's kind of anti-art. But I'm sure there's a rules of stretching a canvas. I'm sure that there's a rules of putting a frame on a canvas and stretching it and doing it properly and preparing the canvas. So it's not an anti-art expression. It's just an organizational way that I do things and in the right order. So you don't keep going backwards and, I forgot to do this or this wasn't done right and I have to redo it. And then there's a whole psychology to producing records. And I produce records. I'm a musician producer. There's 3 kinds of producers. There's an engineer who's got some musical skill and has aligned himself with the band or the artist and has some musical input, but is not a musician. So that would be an engineer producer. And there's some successful guys like that. And then there's a musicologist like John Hammond Sr. John Hammond Sr. had a gigantic record collection, and he was a tasteful, smart guy who could come in, and he didn't play an instrument, but he could talk to the musicians about music. And then there's what I think is the most common is the musician producer. So someone not unlike myself who sat out on the floor with headphones on, has been in stress situations, been, performed on the floor, did a solo, play on command, work in the arrangement, read the chart, blah, blah, blah. And so there's musician producers, which is what I am. So I'm writing this book from the musician producer perspective, how to produce a record. And it's how I do it, basically. So there's not a lot of technical stuff. It's a lot of psychological and tricks and organizational skills. And then I do dwell into, like, I use this certain favorite gear, and here's how I use favorite gear. And it'll have an accompanying DVD with it so that as you read it, it'll see track 1 on the DVD, and you can play the DVD, and then I'll talk further about, what I'm talking about or show you how I use it. So I want it to be as extensive as possible.
All right. And when are you hoping to have that one available?
I'm in the process of closing in on, fingers crossed, my last edit. My editor is the great Michael Melenda. Michael Melenda was the editor for Guitar Player magazine for 20 years. Plus he's a guitar player, plus he's a drummer, plus he's a great writer, and he's a monster editor. I read it. I didn't know that I wrote it. When I read it, it was so good. I was like, who is this guy? This guy's smart.
Well, I'm good.
Yeah. So I got Mike Melenda, which is super, super exciting for me to have him involved in this. So we've done quite a few edits. We've been writing it for a year. I have been formulating the idea for many years, and had written it down and decided nobody's written a book like this. They always write it from the engineering perspective, or they talk about, like from hip hop, like get this drum box and do this and do that. And it's like, dude, that's not producing anything. That's the whole different ball of wax. So maybe I'm too old school in doing this, but I don't know anybody that's done a book like this called How to Produce a Record. And so I just had it in my mind, and I've had it written down. I've talked to people about it. I've talked about it so many times in talking with artists about, here's how we're going to do things. Here's what I do and how we're going to do it. And I've talked about it a bit in interviews, different aspects of what I do in preparing to make a record and making a record. So it's been around for a while, but when it's going to be done exactly, I don't know. But I know I'm nearing the end of maybe one more round of editing from the editor, like little tweaks, and then I have to come up with a script for the DVD. Film this, film that, film this. Right. So the DVD will probably be an hour long, maybe longer. And then I got to figure out how to market it. And I think it's getting easier that people are doing self-publishing and social media marketing. So hopefully I'll do something like that. I might run it up the flagpole with, Warner Press or Hal Leonard or something, just to see what they say, or some music book publisher. But I'm hoping that it'll turn into a curriculum that can be taught. So if you were teaching a recording class or some sort of music class at a local college, you could offer this as an adjunct to your class. Like we're gonna have either a seminar, or we're gonna have a 12-week, split it up into a 12-week course that you could do how to produce a record. And Beth Merlis, who has been the #1 person at Musicians Institute, is a friend of mine, and she's agreed to help me divide it up into a syllabus for education.
Excellent. Well, good deal, Pete. I'm going to guess that once everything it'll be available at PeteAnderson.com.
Absolutely.
Which we've had going across the bottom of the screen here. So because all the 60s with a Twist we were just talking about, all Pete solo stuff, you can purchase through PeteAnderson.com. Before we wrap things up, Pete, here, I know I've taken up quite a bit of your time. Is there anything else is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to throw in?
Well, there's plenty of stuff we could talk about. I mean, I've got signature instruments. I've got a new prototype coming. Hopefully it'll be here by January, called the Bluescaster. I've got my book on my life I've been writing with Adam St. James. That's been going on for quite a while. I don't know when that'll be done, but he's got hours and hours of footage, and he's a great writer. So I'm excited every time I get a snippet of that. I'm just dying to get back to playing, and I've got my little residency gig, and my Monday night, which really does it for me because it's turned out to be like a little mini concert. I never called everybody and said, come to see me Mondays. So it's all people I've met with my guitar on. So it's like, it's not, I have my friends, but I didn't call my friends and say, hey, I really need you to pack the club so I can keep the gig. I didn't do that. So I went from one guy sitting at the bar to like pretty much 40 to 50 people every Monday night coming in to see me play. And it's a blast. And we play what we want, when we want. And I'm at that stage in my life where I want to play what I want, when I want, and how I want. So I get to basically, from an artistic perspective, on Monday night, I've got 2 great musicians that I play with, and I get to go in, stretch a canvas, and paint. And just where it falls is where it falls. And we have some tunes that are structured to help us. Each canvas is a different tune with some parameters to work within, but otherwise we're just having a ball.
Well, you've heard it. So, all right, Pete, we'll tell you what, we'll wrap this edition up here. I do appreciate you taking out so much of your time to join us. It's been a real thrill.
Thank you for being so astute. I've been interviewed quite a few times, and you had some new perspectives, and I'm impressed.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I truly appreciate that. So,
all right. Well, stay well.
Everybody, we'll tell you what, as I said, you can, get everything Pete at PeteAnderson.com. Go check it out. His music is available at bandcamp.com. If you haven't heard 60s with a Twist, you need to. It's really good stuff. And with that, Pete, again, thank you very much. Everybody, have a good night.
See ya.
This has been Music Night at the Majestic with Michael Boswell. If you enjoyed this edition of Music Night at the Majestic, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and at musicnight.net. Music Night at the Majestic is a copyright production of Starliner Media. Any use of the accounts and descriptions of this program, its audio or visual content, without the express written consent of Starliner Media is prohibited. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you next time for Music Night at the Majestic. This is your announcer speaking. Starliner Media.